Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm the Bandit, and on this episode of Faction Factory, I want to talk about my lawyers faction. This is easily the hardest faction I've ever had to create, because I had very specific design goals with it, but had to be extremely careful. When you look at the geeks, they have some cards that seem fun, but are remarkably unfun for many opponents because they break many rules. This often gets them banned. I wanted a faction that has the spirit of the geeks and bends the rules but never breaks them, being very particular in their word choice to create some interesting new abilities. I also wanted a sub-theme of information, as information is extremely powerful in Smash Up, but ultimately intangible and unquantifiable. I also wanted this to be a counter faction that is prepared for anything, but I had to be extremely careful here. Counterpicking is extremely strong in Smash Up, but I don't want the counter to add on to the faction strength. I wanted the strength to come from the counter, and I'm okay with the faction being weaker in the general case, which I prefer for antagonistic factions anyway. These design goals didn't always line up well with each other, and there were many abilities I wanted to include but were a bit dangerous for the game. I want to bend the rules, not break them. When I design factions, I always create extra abilities and whittle the list down, saving the cuts for starting points for future factions. So you're going to hear a lot of, I always wanted to see this in the game stories, because the lawyers were a natural fit for them. I built this faction on the principle that card beats rules, which is really explicit and something I wanted to explore with this faction. Also, we do exactly what the card says, which is why the wording is specifically chosen. For this faction, I really wanted a noir theme, and I went with a Sin City type of vibe, and it was really important to me that, if you are going to make a faction about lawyers, make sure you don't have any copyright issues, so I can say with certainty that no copyright infringement exists on these cards. To help with the flow of the faction, I've broken the cards into 3 groups, rather than just going through minions and actions. I'll present the themes individually, but for the actions, I wanted 5 actions that are always useful, and 5 actions that are situationally useful. As I stated before, information is very powerful, and there is power in withholding it. I've talked about how I hate that scry ruins the surprise, but intellectual property doesn't. At the cost of a card, you can search your deck for any card and place it into your hand, but you do not reveal it to other players. This isn't a case where I'm shortening the card text by reminding you of the Fabinger search rule that you must reveal the card chosen. Card beats rule, and this card is specifically saying not to do so, so you can get any card and no one knows what it is. Continuing with that theme of information, the paralegal always knows what is coming. You can look at another player's hand. You can't do anything with it, but you know what they have. The paralegal also looks at the top card of every deck, casting a wide net for information. Again, no manipulation, just information. And this is every deck, which includes the monsters, treasures, bases, and even the madness deck. For a long time, I've thought that if we revisit madness, we should have different types of madness cards, like the wounds in Nightfall. Since it's Custom Faction Month, I want to give a special shout out to Spencer Riley, who created a new type of madness card for the faction he submitted, and I think he's on the right track. But knowing the top card of every deck can be the start of some powerful combos. Cross-examination can be one of those combos. Cross-examination lets you look at the top 3 cards of each other player's decks. Each card gets sent to its proper destination, but both players are involved in the transaction. You pick one card to put on the bottom, presumably the best card. The victim picks one card to save by placing it on the top, and the third card is discarded. This order is intentional to avoid having a fairly good shot at discarding someone's best card, but also preventing them from saving their best card if they chose first. The final information style card is going to be the most controversial. The rules state that any player can look through any player's discard pile at any time. I draw a ton of information on this, as my short-term memory is terrible and I need to know what was played so far or how many copies of a card are left. To test this effect, I posed a question to the Facebook Smash posting group and watched the chaos that unfolded. The question was, does grave robbing have to reveal the card that is placed into your hand? And though the answer is yes, quite a few people argued passionately that it should be no. Most of the evidence for yes was based on the fact that I can infer it by process of elimination. But non-disclosure agreement takes that away. Non-disclosure agreement turns your discard pile face down so that others cannot see it. If you shuffle or place cards from your discard pile, you do not have to reveal them unless you are playing them immediately, and this goes without saying, don't cheat. Gravedigger cannot grab an action. If an ability requires it, then other players can look at your discard pile on a need-to-know basis. There aren't many cards where this is necessary, so it's not as bad as you think. Opponents aren't stopped from doing anything, they are just withheld information in the normal case. And the lawyer player can freely recur cards without tipping their hands to other players. I wanted this to be a global style enchantment where the base it is on does not matter, as we rarely see those cards in the game, and they make sense as new rules that the lawyers can apply to themselves only. I expect that some players won't like non-disclosure agreement, but it really doesn't change anything. This is a faction that has an advanced version and a basic version, and this is the advanced version with the controversial card. My own teammate Turing Jedi doesn't like this card. He claims he would use it to drive me nuts, and that if I played it against him, he would write down the entire discard pile to mitigate its effects. To me, that is proof of the card's potency that information does make a difference, and I don't think resorting to extreme gamesmanship is good anyway. Do you write down every card that gets shuffled into the deck or revealed at any point? If you've ever played Not Alone, one of my favorite games of all time, there's a powerful Phase 1 card called Smokescreen which temporarily robs the creature of a lot of information. That is the type of effect I'm going for. The next sub-theme I wanted to explore is being intentional with wording for powerful effects. I love card draw, but you have to be careful not to make it excessive. I have always wanted the ability to draw my cards in advance, and I tried to make this work as part of a revised Time Travelers where Phase 4 occurred early, but I found a much better, natural solution for the lawyers. The Chief Counsel can place the top 2 cards of your deck into your hand, not draw them, place them. This is because the Chief Counsel prevents you from drawing cards from your deck. This may create anti-synergies, but that's intentional. What this does is allow you to pre-draw your Phase 4 cards in advance. And if you look carefully at several cards, they also place cards into your hand from your deck. They just don't realize the difference because it didn't matter. Originally with this ability, you couldn't draw cards at all, as a madness counter, but this proved ridiculous with Minions of Cthulhu, and the seal is broken giving you a VP every turn. It means you can still draw madness, and more importantly, you can still draw treasures. And if you use the talent, and later the Chief Counsel breaks his base and goes to the discard pile, the ongoing ability expires, and you can draw your Phase 4 cards again. To compensate for the lost card draw abilities, Loophole lets you place the top card into your hand as long as you have a minion on the base. Continuing with the word place, Jury Selection can take a minion from another base and place it here. This means that minions who cannot be moved can be relocated, and it doesn't trigger move benefits, both good and bad. Habeas Corpus can allow you to place a minion of power 3 or less that you do not own into your hand. This is a clear conflict with the rules, just like Crittercube. My problem with Crittercube isn't with the card itself, but that the other itty critter cards don't work with it as well as I feel they should. Habeas Corpus just makes this easier and puts a small minion back into your hand. The final card is worded very specifically, and it's something that the lawyers themselves cannot utilize because they have no double features. Double Jeopardy is not meant to be a time loop for double features. That would be objectively weaker. Instead, Double Jeopardy states that, after you play an action, you may reveal another copy of that action from your hand and play it as an extra action. The difference is, the original action does not need to come from your hand. If you play one copy from your discard pile, the other can follow from your hand. If Cyberback plays Cyber Evolution from the discard pile, you can follow this one from your hand. If you neophyte a summon, you can get an additional summon. This is something that Time Loop cannot always do, and it also means that the first action always occurs first, instead of leading with Time Loop. The final cards are intended to support and counter cards that make the lawyers fit for any situation, just like real lawyers. The defense attorney utilizes my Triforce of Threes design pattern, where each minion has the same name but a different ability. The defense attorneys allow you to build your own defense. One gives you a local immunity to being removed from play, another prevents your cards from being transferred off the base, and another one prevents your minions from being changed in power or controller. None of them grant full immunity, but with a full team of defense attorneys, you can come pretty close. But for full immunity, there's immunity. Immunity is a play on minion action with the ongoing ability that this minion cannot be affected by other cards. No cards, not even bases. It says other cards, so immunity is the only one that can affect the minion, unless they already had protection, in which case immunity would just be discarded. Immunity can cancel its own ability, so if you wanted to periodically or terminally increase the power of that minion, you could do so. But canceling the ability leaves a window of opportunity for opponents to respond, and the fact that it can be played on any minion means it can be used antagonistically. Antitrust Lawsuit is designed to be a mini Eliza. Other players cannot play more than one card here each turn, and I chose card over minion so that it affects the kaiju actions as well. It's only one base, but we need more Eliza-like counters in the game for those factions who queue up several minions in their hand. Speaking of which, the prosecutor can increase your maximum hand size while reducing that of all other players. The abilities stack, so it's possible to go to 12 and 8 respectively. I liked combining this with the Chief Counsel because you can draw your cards, decide whether this is the turn to strike, and potentially keep both for next turn because you have extra space in your hand. The final card was one of the hardest to write, second to non-disclosure agreement, because it was hard to be explicit and trigger the fact that card beats rules, when normally can't trumps can. Overruled, and the name is really intentional, states, choose a minion who cannot be destroyed or affected. That minion can now be destroyed. Destroy it. This card says explicitly that the card is overruling can't trumps can. Given the current wording, I think that the card's intent is pretty clear that it is meant to conflict and that the card wins out in the end. But this can only destroy minions who couldn't otherwise be destroyed, so it's not a loophole, but a pure counter. I really wanted a way to kill the Game Guru easily, and now I have one. For the actions that I deem always useful, they are habeas corpus, jury selection, loophole, cross-examination, and intellectual property. The actions I consider situationally useful or counters are immunity, overruled, double jeopardy, antitrust lawsuit, and non-disclosure agreement. Some might be frequently useful, but not always, and I'm okay with that. Regarding synergies, I obviously built in the potential for anti-synergy with this faction, and that's intentional. I want factions to be decided carefully, not randomly. But as much as the Chief Counsel blocks card draw factions, most factions don't have card draw and would benefit from it. And maybe the card draw helps you get to the Chief Counsel, while also benefiting from the fact that the prosecutors let you hold on to more cards, something that card draw factions really need anyway. The Thieves loves the extra hand size because it means I can store more treasures in my hand for the Cat Burglar. I can pre-draw my cards and decide whether to go for Cat Burglar or Fence that turn. And the Chief Counsel doesn't block the Master Thief from drawing treasure cards, nor does it block Swipe, which I find lacking when played once, but would be great with Double Jeopardy. Clever Distraction is a great card to grab with intellectual property, but it's not your only option. And given that the Thieves tend to hold on to many of their cards in their hand until the right timing, it's not a dead giveaway as to what I grabbed. Looking further at intellectual property, I think about factions that have a lot of specials where I like all the options. The Tornadoes come to mind. Did I grab Picked Up or Gone with the Wind? I grabbed one of my specials, but which one? Maybe I grabbed one of my lawyers instead. The ability to place any minion on another base can be really powerful and fits perfectly into the Tornado strategy. Whereas some cards would be counters to the Monster Tornado, this would bypass that unless they explicitly could not be affected. Not in Kansas could be powerful, but you rarely know what base you are going to be getting. The paralegals can solve that problem. Innsmouth can flood your hands with cards, especially after a large return to the sea play. The extra hand size from the prosecutor can help with that. Given how timing specific the Innsmouth can be, drawing 2 cards in advance really helps your options so that you can plan better. It means guaranteeing the maximum benefit of a card like spreading the word or recruitment. I will often take a chance on spreading the word that the first locals will draw the second, and by draw, I mean place into my hand, which conveniently works around the Chief Counsel limitation. The only card you are sacrificing is Mysteries of the Deep, but that is one card I usually play early if I can, which may be the card that helps me get to Chief Counsel anyway. Given that this results in 7 cards when used to its maximum, the extra hand size really helps here to avoid discarding. To a lesser extent, looking at the top card of your deck with the paralegal before playing the locals can be nice if there is a specific card you want to avoid sending to the bottom. The clerics have a lot of recursion, most of which is random, which is perfect while non-disclosure agreement is in play. You won't be able to predict what you get back, but at least you will be the only person who will know. This could be very convenient, as there is the threat of a repeated curse of uselessness. I've always been a fan of the Deep Fryer and Been and Gone, and I like the idea of consistently having a large hand size and keeping others with a reduced hand size. That reduced hand size can be really beneficial when playing with the Anansi tails, because having 2 less cards in your hand means you are either holding onto my cards or being forced to discard them, which is great for my Python and Hornet benefits. I like holding on to as many Hornets as possible, which the prosecutor hand size helps with as well. Pot of Beans is great as a double jeopardy target, especially since Anansi can play the first action that triggers double jeopardy. A double collecting stories can also quickly deplete someone of cards that they thought they were holding on to. Ear of Corn is perfect for non-disclosure agreement, especially when combined with Anansi, because I can get back 3 actions and have Anansi grab them when I deem appropriate for a true surprise attack. Reducing the hand size also means a lot to aliens, because returning many minions can be just as good as destroying them if you are forced to discard them anyway. The aliens possess 2 legitimate intellectual property action targets, and even more when you factor in invaders. Did I grab terraforming, or did I grab crop circles? Both are extremely game-changing, but in different ways, and you don't know which one I have. When the aliens start to beam themselves up, that also starts to bloat your hand, which the prosecutor can help with as well. Grabbing your cards in advance also helps you get to your beam-ups, which means you have less risk of leaving your invader unprotected. I wanted the lawyers to be a faction that rises to the occasion instead of being consistently strong, where synergy matters tremendously. I think that there is a lot you can do with this faction, and though it takes some design risks, it's necessary at this junction. I drew a lot of inspiration from other games that I love, and as long as you keep an open mind, you'll be surprised at what can work in the context of Smash Up. Some cards will be controversial, but at worst, it will be the second most controversial faction. What do you think of the lawyers? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for indulging my artwork choice. Someone named Bandit stealing artwork from lawyers seems like an open and shut case. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.